Okay. What are we talking about today? All right then, so welcome back to the North Endurance YouTube channel. My name is Paul, and today we're going to be talking about the UTMB, or more specifically, the UTMB CCC. It was a race I did, I think, 2 weeks ago now. A few people have asked for a bit of a race report, race review, talk through how it went. So this is this video. To start with, we've got to go all the way back, starting in 2017 with the Everest Trail Race, which is pretty much when North Endurance started. There is no video about the Everest Trail Race. If you want to read about it in a blog, there's a link in the description below. It was on the Everest Trail Race. I met there's quite a few, I think there was 60 of us racing, and there was a few British people. A lot of them had done the MDS, the Marathon des Sables, but a lot of them had also been to this race called the UTMB, or the Ultra Marathon de Mont Blanc. That was the first time I'd heard of it. I didn't know anything about it. I didn't know how you qualified. I didn't know there was points to sort of get there. I think it's been happening since 2003 now, and it's sort of seen as the pinnacle race of the ultramarathon world. So after the Everest Trail Race, I decided, right, I want to do the UTMB one day. At the time, it was a points-based system, and I needed to get 6 points to qualify for the CCC, which is the little sister to the main UTMB. I had 2 or 3 points from the Everest Trail Race. So the next year, 2018, I did my first ultramarathon, 90k, and got 4 points for that, so I could enter. And I entered in 2018 into the ballot. I didn't get in. For 2019, I needed to top up my points because my ones from 17 weren't valid anymore. So I did another 2-point race and then to the ballot that year. I didn't get in. 2020, I was going to have to do another 4-pointer, but because of COVID, there'd been no races, all the points carried over. So I entered again in 2020. And the rule at the time was if you hadn't got in for 2 years within the ballot, on the 3rd year, you'd get in. So I actually got in and qualified in 2020. 2021, I was due to go and race in August, and in June, you still couldn't travel to France, or you couldn't travel to France very easily. So I decided to defer my entry to this year, 2022. So the UTMB takes place in Chamonix every year, and there's a number of races going on. So the main event is the UTMB itself, which is 170k and 10,000 meters, and that goes from Chamonix all the way around the Mont Blanc Massif. You've then got the little sister event, which is what I did, the CCC, and that starts in Courmayeur in Italy and does half the massive. So it's Courmayeur, Champex in Switzerland, back to Chamonix, and that's 100 kilometers and 6,000 meters of elevation. Then you've got the OCC, which is shorter, which is 50 kilometers. There's the TDS, which is sort of in between the CCC and the UTMB in terms of distance, but it sort of does a reverse. And then an event called the PTL, which is incredible, where you've basically got mountaineers and runners going off for 6 days. It's 250 kilometers and 25,000 meters of elevation, unmarked course. So the CCC for me would be the biggest single day race I've ever done in terms of distance, running certainly, so 100 kilometers, and then in terms of single day of elevation, I think in Nepal I might have done a 4,000 up, 2,000 down day, or 3,000 down day, but in terms of up and down 6,000 meters in 100k, that was the challenge. So I wanted to focus on it, and I wanted to give it the sort of the respect that it deserves. How did my training go? Well, quite early on in the year I was struggling, to be honest. I was struggling with my knee, so my mileage between sort of January and March was really low. I spent a lot of time in the gym, just trying to get the strength in my left knee to deal with the hills and to deal with sort of the descending especially, and I focused on that throughout the year. The running picked up in April, and I was able to do the Cheshire Elite Half, and then generally progressed up all the way through the year. And there'll be something on screen now that basically shows you the number of hours, the mileage running just increased steadily all the way through to August. Living in Liverpool, as you can imagine, it's not particularly hilly around here. So for those who know it and local and know me, we've got the Prom. It's pretty flat. Goes all the way into town. Brilliant. Along the Mersey, it's flat. There is not a hill. And in terms of doing hill reps, we've got a couple of roads, and you can probably do 2 to 3 minutes maximum. So wherever I ran, I've been over on Scouse Mountain, Mole Famo quite a lot. 45-minute drive. And otherwise, we've thrown in a couple of races and a couple of like what we'll call shock weekends. You can see a video on one of our panic training weekends, but the reality is it's a shock weekend. It's going out and doing the specific training that we need to do in terms of getting the elevation in, spending the time on feet and practicing speed hiking and conditioning your muscles to descending, wearing your kit, trying all your nutrition and those types of things. So I managed to do 2 or 3 of those. Generally, by the time the race had come around, I was actually starting to get fairly confident. So I've done quite a few 40k days. My pace was there. I've PB'd on over 5k, half marathon distance this year, which is good. And then elevation wise, yeah, I've done a fair amount. I think 37,000 meters up to the end of August. In terms of race prep, I've done Trail Marathon Wales, had a pretty good result there. Though went slightly wrong at the very last turn, and Xterra Snowdonia, which was 50k with just over 2,000 meters of elevation in, and had a good result there. If you want to know anything about my kit selection, kit nutrition on race day, I'll save that for a separate video, bit too in depth. If you do want to know anything, or just put some questions in the comments below and I'll get back to you or make another video that goes through all that. The one thing that was a bit different going into UTMB is you're ranked, and that's based off your UTMB index, which is effectively a score or ranking based off all your race results in trail races. So suddenly a few days before, I looked up all the British athletes and realized I was ranked 10th in the CCC, and I was actually ranked in terms of my bib number 360th going into the race, and that's something that has a bit of pressure. I downloaded the tracking app and it actually gave me my predicted time based off my ranking, and my expected finish time was going to be 15 hours 15. And having only done a couple of trail races which I like really focused on and executed pretty well, I felt a bit of pressure to try and reach that performance over a distance I'd not ran before. So race day, the forecast had been true. It was far cooler, and there was thunderstorms expected in the afternoon. We got the bus to Courmayeur, collected fine, everything all good, went to a toilet in a cafe, nice little cafe before the start, got into the start pen, and that was it. It was ready to go. I was in the first wave, which was good because of my ranking. That meant I wasn't going to have to worry about that sort of queue up the mountain so much. And when the gun went, it went out fast. I was quite surprised. I was running forward, trying to just pick off places, as many as I could. And you ran through the streets, there was really good support. And then it started to just sort of this gradual climb. Not particularly steep, maybe 6%. It was runnable for a while, but this then carried on for about 20 minutes. And at that point, you just pray not to be the first person to walk. That's all I was thinking was, I don't want to be the first person to walk. So I managed to just sort of get out my poles towards the end of the climb and start sort of using them to aid me along while still running. But generally you could tell that people were just going to start battling for spaces and places. That's where things got a little bit bargy for about 10 minutes. So people who've gone out fast were just happy to get some rest, start hiking up the hill. You couldn't overtake the person in front of you. However, there were still people behind who were desperate to get in front of you. So we were going up these sort of switchbacks, and you just have people trying to like scamper up on the inside. And all I could think was, it's 100k, we've got 6,000 meters to go, and there's pushing and shoving. I think I actually took a hiking pole to the leg right at the start, which was a bit annoying. So it settled down after a while, and then that climb went on for 1,400 meters. So we were going for a good hour and a half. The view was just getting better and better. It opened up, it got quite steep. Didn't feel the altitude, absolutely fine. And at the top, went through the checkpoint and then just carried on. And it was a short downhill to the first water stop. I knew I wasn't going to need to stop there. I had plenty of nutrition with me. It was just a case of refilling one bottle and cracking on. And that was going to be the first sort of flat section that was runnable, and would take us through to about 25 kilometers before the next climb. And there was an aid station there where I could sort of have something else if I needed it. But again, I was carrying everything I needed to get to certainly further, or get to halfway in fact. That's where the weather started to change. So on the first climb, I realized that it was really, really dusty. The trails, if it rained, they were going to turn to mud. It was just a thick layer of dust. And that's exactly what happened. So the rain that was forecast later on in the afternoon had come much, much earlier. You looked across the valley to the sort of the massif itself on Mont Blanc, and it was completely covered in cloud. The thunder was starting to rumble, and then it started raining pretty heavily. You could hear how heavily it must have been raining further up on the massif itself, because you could hear rock falls. There was just a sort of crackling, large rumbles that weren't thunder on the other side of the valley, just sort of echoing around the valley. Likewise, everyone started stopping, putting on their jackets, and I went for my good jacket, shall we say, just to stay dry early on. But then straight back into it, straight running, and there was one short descent before the second main climb. I think it was into a place called Arnouvaz, which was the second aid station, and that was pretty sketchy. It was pretty muddy, so my shoes were good. They were certainly better than some people's, but you certainly had to watch it on a few of the corners. The next climb was going to be to the Italian-Swiss border, and we'd come out of the aid station. It was still hammering it down, and as soon as we started going uphill, that's when you start to cook. So I was unzipping my jacket, and the rain had started to ease off. But that climb was pretty muddy, and it was just, you were sort of slipping as you were going forward, so he was trying to lean on the poles to sort of make sure they were sticking and making sure you were carrying momentum. It was just the trail was just starting to get churned up pretty quickly, and that took us all the way back up to sort of 2,500 meters again before a pretty long descent. So the descent from there off the Grand Col de Ferret was pretty epic, but it was runnable, and we just tried to get into a rhythm of following other people and run pretty hard. I managed to sort of make up some ground, or I put a target on someone and just try and chase them slowly. Likewise, if someone was moving pretty fast, I didn't like to sort of absolutely force my way past them, as long as it wasn't sort of ruining my race and my momentum. But this descent was the best part of 20k. It was long, and it went all the way down. So there was an aid station in La Foulée. I was pretty quick in and out of there. I just refilled up a drink again. Then it became downhill, but going through sort of just tracks, a little village. I knew I was in Switzerland because the grass is greener in Switzerland. If you've ever been, something about it, I just sort of knew I was there. And I remember sort of filming around, looking at this valley, pristine little sort of chalets. And yeah, it was pretty pretty. But again, the road just then carried on down, and it was very gradual descending at this point, but it just meant there was a huge part of the race that was runnable, and it felt like I was running forever. We went through this little small town that was, I stopped, and I think I splashed my hat and cooled myself off. I filled a bottle, a water fountain, and then sort of managed to sort of pick up other runners and find my way through. More downhill running, all on road, and we crossed the road and started the climb up to Champex Lac, which was going to be the halfway point, and where I was planning to sort of meet Lucy and refill all my nutrition for the second half of the race and change my shoes if I want to. But the sun had come out, and I was actually starting to struggle. I'd stopped for a wee and realised like I was a little bit dehydrated. So at this point, I was just pouring fluids in. As we climbed up, a few other people had stopped, and they were refilling at fountains as well, so they're having exactly the same issues as me. But the woods through that section were brilliant. There was lots of like little wooden carvings, and it was generally in the shade. But when you arrived into Champex Lac, it was first place on the race, when there seemed to be lots of supporters waiting for the aid station. So saw Lucy, saw my mum. Yeah, the first stop and halfway through, so 57k into the race, the best part of 3,000 meters climbed. And it's probably also where I started to doubt myself to some extent. I was just worried I'd got things slightly wrong. Everything was starting to taste a little bit sweet. I wanted something savoury, and I knew I was slightly dehydrated. So when I got into that aid station, I did the things that were planned. So I changed my socks. Although my top was soaked because the sun had just come out, I knew it was white and I was going to keep it on. No matter how filthy it was, no matter how wet it was, I was going to keep it on. It would be cooler. And if I wanted to change later on, I could. In terms of food, I just wanted anything salty at that point. So we got some biscuits, I had some watermelon, had a salty sort of like soup that was effectively a broth. Got all the little grit and things like that out my shoes, changed my socks and was ready to go. But I did take some time to eat and drink, and longer than was expected. At all the other stops I was in and out, I was fast. So all the way through the race, I was using my phone to track where I was, but I turned off all notifications so it wasn't beeping, I wasn't getting distracted. And all I was doing was looking at people's numbers around me. So I've been running with quite a few pro women, and generally people who had slightly lower numbers than mine, which meant I felt like I was doing okay. The aid station noticed there was a few more people around me with a similar number or a lower number. So at that aid station, Champex, I met a guy called Rob who recognized me because we have a mutual friend, and his number was above mine effectively. I left the aid station feeling much better and just was going to crack on with the race ahead. The sun had started or disappeared after sort of 10 minutes or so, and it was generally a bit of running before we hit the third of the 3 final climbs. So each of those final climbs I knew was sort of 800 to 900 meters. It's like doing an effort up Snowdon. Each one was going to take the best part of an hour, or probably just over an hour, with a descent. First climb, I caught back up with Rob, and he looked like he was struggling a little bit. We chatted briefly, and he said to me, "Oh, you sort of resurrected then?" And I felt, yeah, I felt actually it was good. I wasn't going to take too many risks with my stomach. It wasn't feeling 100%, but I just adjusted what I was expecting to put into my system. Went back to first principles of going, right, I'm going to stick to Coke, water. I'm not going to force anything down that I just didn't want to eat. And if I could get a few more gels in, I was probably between them, my carb mixes and my gels, I was going to be getting in enough and just carry on hydrating. So that's all I did. The descent was quite tricky, that one in particular. Lots of trees, lots of roots, lots of rocks, and just pretty technical. So we were awkward, but it was okay. I was fine. And your mind starts to wander towards, I've just got to finish. My legs are knackered. I don't need to hammer it. So just towards the end, I managed to sort of, it opened up a little bit, and I think I left him behind, and I got into Trient. Generally felt okay. Got into the aid station, had some soup, had some bread, had some meat, had a little bit of cheese, just grabbed it and got off. Knew that I had one more climb, and then there was another aid station where hopefully I'd get some support. So the penultimate climb, again, just get into a rhythm, get up it. That climb was okay, pretty tough, but was with some people who managed to hold like a decent pace. The descent off the top of there was pretty weird. It came off the top and went into, actually there was a sort of a drink station or a checkpoint that was in a cattle shed or a cow shed. Ran through there, pretty slippy, got some water, and then it was a much more open descent, and I was able to run a bit. I wasn't pushing it again, I wasn't pushing really hard, but I was able to run much more. However, getting towards the bottom of that descent, it became a forest track, and it was starting to get dark, and it was okay. And then there was a sharp turn into the forest, and it was almost pitch black in there. So it was only a short section through the woods, but the head torch was on at this point, and I could just about see everything fine. A guy snuck ahead of me who didn't put his torch on and was really struggling and going really slow. So eventually he stopped, and I managed to sort of get my feet moving, but I was still a little bit clumsy at that point. It was just fatigue had crept in, and at this point I was sort of deciding, do I have some caffeine or not? It wasn't sort of, you've been out all day, your melatonin levels are super high, and you're going into the night. So with one climb and one descent to go, had some caffeine, I had some Diorolite, and just wanted my stomach to settle. So in that aid station, again, salty soup, a little bit of meat, a little bit of bread, and that was it. Lots of Coke to sort of, which I've always found settles my stomach quite well. At that one, didn't really do anything apart from change my t-shirt. It was dark. It was dark anyway. It was the tent was really warm. Left was really cold, but as soon as you're going uphill, it was absolutely fine again. At this point, it's pitch black, and it was just following one other person, and it was a really long trail, gradual uphill. Along, I think it must have been a longer river, until the point when you could see all these torches going up the side of the mountain. and that was going to be the final climb. I'd heard it was tough, but I didn't know how tough. So we got to this climb and it was steep, really big steps, more like a sort of a Lake District unkept path where there was sort of bits of scrambling, but generally you were sort of planting your poles and then using them to push yourself up, because the steps are big and it was just working at awkward angles. I was generally okay in the dark. I just had my head torch on quite a low beam because I didn't want to sort of use up all the battery. Picking out sort of the flags and the route along this was actually really good as well, because I think it was probably one of those times where there was going to be lots of different lines, but the torches were just picking out the flags. So I wasn't fast, but I just kept on moving. I'd overtaken one person, he'd stayed with me, but there was certainly a few others who came through, and certainly towards the top I had started to struggle on the previous climb as well with my breathing. I just felt like I couldn't get a really deep breath. Now, whether that was just the effects of altitude taking their toll over the day, or just, and I've had this before in marathons where you can only breathe to sort of a certain depth, like you've been taking sort of shallower breaths, so you've been doing exercise with faster breaths, just not getting that full lungful. So started taking some deep breaths. But come the top, it was sort of a flat and shallow climb up to the summit. We reached the top of this climb and I knew there was going to be like a slight downhill and a sort of a flat run with a short climb into a place called La Flèche. I didn't know anything about it. I just knew there was a ski lift, and I'd asked, and it was saying on my watch it was the last climb, or there was only one climb to go. So again, there's a bit of relief there. But at this point, I've got to say, it's probably my lowest point of the race. People were coming past, not low. I didn't feel bad. I just felt like I didn't have a lot left to give, and I was just moving really, really clumsily again. Yeah, I was just a bit slow. So I was moving with one or two others. Jacob had caught me up and we were chatting again, but then somebody got in front of me and they were slower than me. I shouldn't have let them in front, and again it just threw me, and I watched maybe 6 or 7 runners sort of go into the distance, and I just followed this guy, sort of, I think it was an Italian, just pretty poorly. I looked at my watch and I realized that I was going to miss my target. I just lost enough time over the last 2 climbs, when I was suddenly now sort of 8 minutes over target to hit 15 hours. But in general, I was still happy. I was like, the day was going well enough that I was going to be close to my predicted time. I got into this last aid station, and all these guys who would like run off ahead of me were just sort of like stood there, and I got in. I filled up my bottle with sort of Coke and water. I think I had a quick cup of Coke and got out. And I just thought, I've gained 4 places here, and all these people who sort of rushed ahead, I've suddenly got back. That was it. The racer mode sort of absolutely came back on at that point, and I thought, these guys aren't going to get past me. The descent off the top under this ski lift was really, really steep. But then we picked up sort of more of a path, or quite like a road, and there was a line on one side which was sort of a clear trail rather than sort of a gravel road. But it was runnable, and I just tried my best to let my legs take me at that point, lean forward and go. And that carried on for quite a while. I couldn't see any torches coming from behind me, and I managed to sort of pick up 1 or 2. And then we entered the woods. I absolutely hammered it, and I was flying, and I loved it. So Headtorch was on the brightest it could be at this point. The only time we had to watch it was going around a couple of switchbacks where it's almost a delay in where you're looking. But otherwise, I was skipping over roots, I was skipping over rocks. I wasn't worried about trips. I was absolutely flying. It was probably some of the best descending I did all race. And I think overall, actually, in the results, I overtook 16 people from La Flèche down to Chamonix. Generally on the flat, I could still run. I wasn't going to let anyone overtake me at that point. I was thinking about the finish, and I'd asked my mum and Lucy whether they'd run down the finish with me. Yeah, through the streets, past sort of where we registered, down the high street effectively, and then you wind round and through into a square. I managed to pick up somebody who had stopped to collect the flag, and I descended so well. Sort of Lucy and my mum weren't expecting me. I got down there sort of 10 minutes quicker than predicted. So I was sort of looking over my shoulder, said, "You coming? Or, you know, if we're going now." And ran into the finish, and they just ran slightly behind me. Yeah, I got to soak it in, and I finished in 15 hours and 20 minutes. First thing I did when I crossed the line is point towards you guys. So everyone in North Endurance who was supporting and cheering me on and were following the tracking and stayed up, thanks very much. I knew you'd be watching and I knew where the webcam was. It was only then I started to find out my results. So I'd come 236th, which was a lot higher than my 360th place ranking. And then it turns out I came 8th Brits. Yeah, and I was just made up. The whole day, it wasn't perfect. I spent a little bit longer in the aid station than I'd like, but I'm not going to beat myself up over it. You just can't. I look back through now, and if I'd been 20 minutes quicker and I was generally probably 25 minutes longer or 20 minutes longer in that aid station than most of the other British athletes around me, and that was the difference between being sort of 8th Brit and 4th Brit. But it was my first time there. I got around in one piece, no injuries, my toes were okay, all my sort of kit had been spot on. In terms of nutrition, there was things I certainly learned. I think I tried to put in too much effectively and probably too much early on. And yeah, the experience was awesome. Yeah, so the day after the race, went into Chamonix, or hobbled into Chamonix, and we've been watching the coverage all morning, but it was amazing to see some of the pros finish. So Killian obviously winning and getting his 4th win, breaking the record. Tom Evans, 3rd overall. Obviously British athlete, but also the PTL athletes finishing who have been out there for like 5-6 days. Someone had died on this, I think their 1st or 2nd day of the event, which had left a real shadow. But see those guys come in, some of whom were absolutely broken, and even the sort of the last of the CCC finishers finishing. Everyone gets a huge cheer as they run through Chamonix. The crowds were pretty awesome. After the race, we had a couple of days exploring, got the cable cars and the trains up to various mountains, taking the views, hobbled about, and yeah, it's an awesome place. The number of trails out there is fantastic, and I certainly want to go back. So what are my highlights? The coverage. I really enjoyed watching the race while I was out there. I know a lot of people enjoyed watching it as well and tracking me, and while they were tracking me, they got to watch some amazing footage from some absolute brilliant runners who were running with the best in the world. The helicopter footage, the drone footage, everything about it, and all the tracking and the stats. It was really good and really well organized. The course, fantastic views, bit cloudy on the day that we were doing it, but it's epic, and I'd certainly like to go back and hike more of it and explore. Now I'm more familiar with the area. The atmosphere through the entire week was amazing, and it was awesome. I think I was a little bit unfortunate to finish at midnight. Maybe not quite as many people about, but saying that, there were still people in the bars that were still open and cheering me on as I ran down the street. And generally through the week, that, like I said, the support and the respect that goes towards all the runners, no matter what event they're taking part in, was awesome. Gripes. I've got to mention a few. The Expo. I didn't want to waste my energy before the event. What I did want to do was use the opportunity to, you don't get many chances to go and try all the latest shoes, different brands, see what people are doing, look at equipment. And I didn't want to do it before the race. I don't like buying merchandise before the race. And I assumed it was going to go on throughout the event. And actually, by the time the elite athletes were finishing on the Saturday, the Expo was completely gone. Post-race, once I finished, I crossed the line and it was pretty dead. There was meant to be some post-race food, and to be honest, from what I saw, it was just another aid station. There was a couple of bits of bread and cheese and cereal bars and fruit, and I wasn't gonna. It was 20 past midnight. I didn't really fancy a piece of banana. I thought that was a little bit poor, to be honest. Likewise, we got given that lovely fleece. Great to sort of get warm quickly, and my body temperature obviously suddenly dropped after the race. However, considering all the sort of sustainability push, to be giving out fleeces from Hoka just seem a bit, yeah. So if you were there, if you were racing or you were just supporting or you're at the event, if you've got any thoughts about the event, be interested to hear them, pop them in the comments below. And finally, a few thank yous. So thanks to my mum and Lucy and Lucy's mum, who are out there supporting and looking after me. Lucy, who, dealt with all the buses and managed to sort of have everything sorted out for me at the aid stations. It was super helpful. Finally, everyone at North Endurance, everyone who sent me a message, just generally for supporting us, the club. We'll back everyone who's one of our athletes, who's a club member, one of our friends in everything that endeavour you to do. But it's also nice that you're connected with us and you're willing to support us as well, and as coaches, and that's really appreciated. And finally, everyone who's trained with me throughout the year, everyone who comes down to our run sessions, anyone who's part of the community, understand it helps. Getting out the door isn't always the easiest when you've got sort of the burden of a race in front of you. So if you guys keep showing up, I'll keep on showing up, keep leading the sessions, and we'll all move forward together. And that's what it's all about. So if you're interested in North Endurance or anything about what we do, check out the links below, and otherwise catch you next time.